The gun was pointed straight at my chest. I kept both hands in plain sight, trembling just enough for him to notice, but not enough for him to pull the trigger. Out of the car. Now. I had just left a constitutional law conference. My robe was still hanging in the back seat. But that didn't matter. Not to him. Because to that officer, I wasn't Judge Thomas Reed of the United States Supreme Court. I was just an old black man behind the wheel of a Lexus. It was a warm Wednesday afternoon. The kind where the sun cuts between tree branches and the roads of Alexandria, Virginia hum quietly with patience. I had just finished delivering a keynote address at Howard Law. A full house. Standing ovation. My talk was on judicial ethics in the modern age. Seemed ironic now. The robe I'd worn for decades was neatly folded in my garment bag behind me. My clerk, James, had offered to ride along, but I told him I needed the drive. My wife, Darlene, was waiting with sweet tea and probably some of her ridiculous banana pudding. The GPS told me to take the scenic route through Stafford County. I obliged. The Lexus purred under me. Leather smooth, AC on low. Ray Charles played softly through the speakers. That's when I saw the flashing lights in my rearview mirror. What started as a drive home quickly became a test of everything I believed about this country. About justice. About how fragile power really is when you're judged by skin, not service. I pulled over, calm as I've always been in the face of confrontation. I've presided over trials that shook the country. I've had senators glare at me from across confirmation hearings. I've ruled on death penalty appeals and witnessed mothers sob in my courtroom. Nothing shakes me, or so I thought. But none of that prepared me for the look on this young cop's face. He stomped up to my window, hand on his holster, lips tight. License and registration. No, good afternoon. No reason for the stop. Nothing. I responded slowly. Of course, officer. May I ask what I've done? I'll tell you after I see your hands move less. That's when I noticed it. His hand now gripped the gun on his belt. I complied. Slowly. Carefully. I passed him both documents. He barely glanced at them. Step out of the vehicle. Now. Officer, I'm Judge Thomas Reed. I assure you. I set out. That word echoed. He didn't know me. Not really. But he knew my skin. My age. My face. And that was enough. I stared at him a moment longer than I should have, trying to memorize his face. Later I realized I wasn't scared, I was grieving. Grieving for every young man who'd stood where I stood without a title to shield him. I stepped out. He yanked open the door with unnecessary force, then shoved me toward the trunk. My knees cracked. I hadn't stood that fast in years. Still, I didn't flinch. Years on the bench had taught me how to face down ignorance. You got drugs in here? Weapons. No, sir. I have my court robe, some documents, and... He wasn't listening. He was ripping through my back seat, pulling out the robe like it was a costume. What's this, Halloween? That moment cracked something in me. That's the robe I wore while delivering the opinion in Jefferson versus Martin. You might want to look it up. He blinked. Step back. Keep your hands visible. Am I being detained? You're suspicious. Suspicion is not a crime. I saw the flicker of doubt behind his aviators. A small ember of recognition. But ego's a powerful thing. And racially profiled power? That's even worse. A woman jogged by across the road. She saw me, her pace slowing. She pulled out a phone and started recording. My heart didn't ease. It sank deeper. Because if a gun went off, a recording wouldn't rewind a bullet. He moved toward the computer in his cruiser, muttering. I could hear him whispering words under his breath. My name, probably. That's when I heard the change in tone. He stopped barking orders. For a full 10 seconds, there was only the sound of the keyboard. And then he stepped back out. You said you were a judge? I still am. He scratched his temple, looking confused. Of the Supreme Court? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My badge was still sitting on the passenger seat. Gleaming. Embossed. Then the radio on his shoulder crackled. He turned away, muttering again. That's when a black SUV pulled up behind my Lexus. I knew that silhouette. Marshal Etta Gaines. Former military police. A wall of composure. She stepped out in full uniform. Calm, precise. She walked to the officer. Is there a reason why my protectee, the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Thomas Reed, is being detained? The officer blinked. I didn't know. Exactly. She stepped between us. You'll now stand down and cease all engagement with Justice Reed. If necessary, we'll file civil rights violations with the DOJ. He stammered. Backed away. I walked past him without a word. Etta opened the door for me, her eyes flicking back toward the cruiser. "I knew something was off," she muttered. "We tracked your car when you didn't check in." I nodded, but my throat felt like gravel. I had more to say, but not now. Not to him. The silence in the SUV was suffocating. Etta didn't ask questions. She drove like she always did, controlled, deliberate. I stared out the window, my reflection a shadow against the midday sun. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. James. Then Darlene. Then a number I didn't recognize, probably media. News travels fast. When we got home, the front yard was quiet. But the news vans came within the hour. A neighbor must have tipped them off. I sat at the kitchen table, Darlene across from me, holding my hand like it was a rope. Her silence spoke volumes. "You okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm breathing. Thomas, I want you to raise hell." I chuckled. She meant it. She always did. Later that night, I turned on the television. The footage the jogger took was already circulating. My face. The cop. The drawn gun. The rope. The silence. Commentators were already dissecting it. Supreme Court justice profiled in routine stop. The headlines ranged from outrage to performative. I turned it off. What disturbed me wasn't the attention. It was how many people said, "But he's a judge," as if that's what made the violation unacceptable. As if dignity was reserved for the titled. The next day I got a call from the Chief Justice. Concerned. Supportive. But measured. "This could become political," he warned. "I'm not trying to start a fire," I said. "But I won't let this get buried." We set up a meeting with the Stafford County Police Department. Their internal affairs team. The officers' union. My security team. Even the mayor. At that meeting I didn't wear my robe. I wore a gray sweater and slacks. Because I needed them to see me not as Justice Reed, but as the man they nearly gunned down for nothing. "I'm not here for an apology," I began. "I'm here for change." They looked at each other. "I want every officer trained in cultural literacy. Implicit bias. Civil rights. I want psychological evaluations reviewed annually. And I want a community oversight board with teeth, not a PR stunt." The room went quiet. The mayor nodded slowly. The police chief cleared his throat. "You have our attention, sir." "No. You had that when my title came up. What I want is your accountability." And just like that, it began. Committees were formed. Training modules developed. Officers had to take new courses not once, but quarterly. And I visited each session. I watched. I asked questions. I challenged the assumptions. And slowly the walls began to crack. Months passed. Headlines faded. But the impact had only begun. One crisp autumn morning I returned to Stafford, not in a black SUV but in my own car. The same Lexus. My presence was no longer met with suspicion. This time I was invited. The community center was packed. Dozens of officers sat in plastic chairs, notebooks in hand, listening to a speaker from the NAACP. A few shifted uncomfortably, but many nodded along. I sat quietly in the back, my presence unannounced. I didn't want to be the face in the spotlight. I wanted to be the mirror in the room. Afterward, one young officer approached me. Mid-20s. Hispanic. Fresh badge. "Justice Reed?" he asked. "Yes." He looked nervous. "I want you to know, sir. I joined this force because of what happened. I want to be better than that." That moment stayed with me. Later that month, I was asked to give a speech at a local high school. Not about the law. About being black and seen. About what it means to carry both the robe and the target. I told them the truth. I earned my seat on the highest court in the land. But even that didn't shield me. That's not cause for despair, it's a call to purpose. You don't have to wait until you wear robes or suits or badges to demand dignity. They applauded. Some cried. Outside, I saw a mural being painted across the street, of justice blindfolded, yes, but also of black fathers holding their sons. Back home, Darlene watched me carefully. "You're not sleeping again," she said. "I keep replaying it," I admitted. What if I'd reached too fast? What if James hadn't called Etta? "You survived," she said, "so now make it mean something." So I did. I partnered with legal nonprofits to advocate for body cam reform and better funding for public defenders. I started a summer mentorship program for law students of color. We called it the Bench Initiative. In our first year we had 10 mets. By the third we had 80. And every year I told them the same thing. Power without empathy is tyranny. Justice without humanity is hypocrisy. 3 years later, I returned to Howard Law to deliver another keynote. This time, I didn't speak about judicial ethics. I spoke about survival, about the weight of grace, about what it means to be visible and vulnerable in equal measure. When I stepped onto that stage, I looked out at hundreds of students, young, brilliant, determined. I told them what I hadn't said the first time. Law is not just words written on parchment. It's protection or persecution. It's breath or a baton. Your hands can carry both justice and pain. Choose wisely. A standing ovation followed, but that's not what I remember. I remember the grandmother who stopped me on the way out, tears in her eyes. She said, "My grandson wanted to be a cop. After he saw what happened to you, he wants to be a judge." I remember the young woman who said she dropped out after her brother's death in lockup, but came back after reading my story. And I remember standing outside under the same sun that had lit the worst day of my life, watching students file past the building named in my honor, the Reed Center for Justice and Reform. Darlene stood beside me. Her hand found mine. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said. "We did. All of us who survived." If you're watching this, ask yourself, would you have pulled that trigger? Would you have asked the question before judging? Share this story. Talk about it. Because dignity shouldn't depend on rank. And no one should need a robe to be respected on the road. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe to channel for more powerful stories. Thank you for watching.